Let's sit nice and tall and close the eyes. And just take a nice breath in, a nice breath out. And just experience yourself, the physical body. Noticing any sensations, tightness, flexibility, circulation, congestion, freedom. And just allow the heart to be filled with so much gratitude for everything this physical body endures in this life. It's just so much, so much. So many experiences. And it never complains. It just carries on as you wish it to. It does the best it can do, no matter what you ask it to do. So let the heart fill with gratitude. And then bring awareness to your mind, your emotional state, your thoughts. And just notice the energy of that. Notice how many thoughts there are. Notice the type of emotions that are flowing through right now. Just noticing. And allow the heart to feel gratitude for all that the mind carries, for how it remains resilient in the face of the fluctuating emotions, the fluctuating thoughts. You can have the most detrimental thoughts in the mind, and your mind will still bounce back. It'll still hold an open space for the possibility of its own healing. So allow yourself to be grateful for the resiliency of your mind and the emotional part of your mind. And then be aware of spirit, the soul, the super soul. And just notice its condition in this moment, or your perception of its condition. Do you feel connected to it or disconnected? Allow yourself to fill with gratitude that the soul and the super soul are always with you. Spirit is always present, even when you deny it, even when you doubt it, even when you curse it. In all moments, in all conditions, in all experiences, it is always there. Open to reminding you of your wholeness and your goodness. I'm so grateful for the body, for the mind, for the spirit. And really listening to what's being communicated. And setting the intention now to deepen that communication. Conscious listening, responsiveness, and a deeper relationship with self and with Source. And drawing the hands together in front of the heart, we'll set that intention with one beautiful Om. Take a nice breath in. Om. Bowing the head to the heart, acknowledging all that is, and drawing the face to center, release the hands. So good morning, everyone. So good to see you all. Good morning. Good morning.
Buen día.
So today I want to talk a bit about listening as a form of communication and as a foundation for relationship. And so everybody here has had a bit of a different path in this life. You have different jobs, different responsibilities, different families, different friends. Some may overlap, but generally speaking, you've had your own experiences in this life. 99.9% of the time, they're individual. But I'll bet you, if we asked, everybody would reply nearly the same. Has there ever been a moment you felt isolated? Has there ever been a moment you felt lonely? Has there ever been a moment you felt misunderstood? Has there ever been a moment you felt not listened to? Has there ever been a moment where you really longed for self-expression and felt so hindered and stuck and unable to express that it caused a deep sorrow within yourself? Anybody ever experienced that? Yeah. So no matter how different our paths are, we've all experienced this suffering, which is based in ignorance. It really is based in ignorance. And it's the kind of ignorance that starts inside of oneself, not outside. And the foundational cause of that ignorance is that we're not listening. We're just not listening. We're not listening. Even right now, there's a very large part of us that's not listening. In every moment, there's a large part of us that is somewhere else, with some other concern, with some other experience, with some other wish, some other imagination, some memory, some projection, something. And we're not listening. And when we don't listen, we miss the moment. When we're not listening, we're not really having the experience. And when we're not really having the experience, then the relationship that we're cultivating is a relationship of absence, not a relationship of presence. You ever have a conversation with someone like that where you're talking to them and you know they're not there? We've all been guilty of doing that also, where someone's talking to us and we're just like thinking about the next thing. That's ignorance. That's not being with things the way they are. It's not being present. And the relationship that builds is a relationship of absence, not a relationship of presence. So if someone comes to you and they are looking for your support, they're looking for empathy, they need something, not necessarily want, maybe want, but they need something. If you're absent, how can you give it to them? If you're absent and you're not listening, how can you support them? And vice versa. If you go to somebody because you have a genuine need to be heard, a genuine need for honest feedback, a genuine need just to someone to hold a space, how can they do that if they're not listening? And if they're half listening or listening 1/10 of the way? They can't. Not really. So we leave most of our interactions with a sense of being rejected and neglected and unheard. And then we walk away, a little bit of a pout, and we look for someone else to fill the void that was just created by a relationship based on absence rather than presence, only to find that we encounter the same relationship of absence rather than presence, but maybe in a slightly different way. But the absence is there. And it's not just that the person that we're trying to communicate with is absent, we're absent too. We're absent from the words we're saying, from the thoughts we're thinking, from the emotions we're feeling, from the bigger picture, and from the relationship, because we're not really seeking to communicate with that particular person because of relationship. We're just looking to be heard by someone, anyone. And so we're just as absent as they are. This affects our whole life. Does that make sense? Yeah. Does it resonate? Can you recognize that there's been at least one time in life? Yeah. So if this is our practice, if this is the proving ground, if this life is the place where we're meant to cultivate the qualities necessary to come into a deeper relationship with Source, what are we training ourselves to do? To be absent in that relationship, as well as our human relationships and our human to environment and all other beings' relationships. We're teaching ourselves how to be half present, if that. So that's, we see sometimes students will ask, well, I feel disconnected from church. Say, well, how often do you go? Well, holidays. That's an absent relationship. Of course you feel disconnected. You're not listening. You're not speaking mindfully. You're not watching, witnessing, feeling. Of course you feel disconnected. I'm not talking about personal issues with, abuses and things like that. I'm just talking about people who have what they perceive as a generally healthy relationship within their church other than their disconnection. They want to be there, but they just don't, so they're absent. It's like a student, who gets a D on their test because they never came to class. Well, of course they're going to be dissatisfied with the D, but how much effort did they put into it? If they didn't put the effort into the study, then their grade is going to reflect that. If we don't put the effort into our relationships, then absence is the consequence for that lack of investment. So if you want to feel connected to your church, to your temple, to your partner, to your children, to your community, then you have to invest. You got to be present. This is part of what's wrong with politics today. Everybody's got a mouth. Wah, wah, wah. Charlie Brown's parents. Wah, 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 wah. And nobody's saying anything. Nobody's saying anything because nobody's witnessing and nobody's listening. And therefore, whatever they're saying has no meaning. If our politicians opened their eyes, their ears, shut their mouths, and open their hearts, then maybe they would have something to say that was worth listening to. That's a relationship of absence. They're absent. I think we kind of call that they're not in touch, right? They're not in touch. What we're saying is they're not listening. But the fault of our communication, the fault of our language is that we say, well, you're just out of touch. So is everybody. Everybody in that community, to some degree, is out of touch, not listening. If we really want to start addressing the problems of our world, the problems of our society, the problems of our town, of our neighborhood, of our family, of our community, of ourself, then we need to start listening. Something really beautiful happens when we start deepening our listening, when we start slowing down, utilizing little exercises about conscious listening, asking for feedback. This is what I heard. Is that really what you meant? And if I'm incorrect in what I heard, would you please let me know what you meant so that I have a clearer understanding? Little exercises. And pretty soon what we find is that we don't really hear very much at all, which means we don't really know anywhere near what we think we do about people. Because we never really listened to them to hear what their heart was saying. They use their words to cover up their heart. And we think they are their words and not their heart. Because we don't know their heart. See if I can say that a different way. We use our language as a disguise. That's our mask. It's our masquerade. We use our language. We talk tough. We talk sweet. We hide behind our words. We're passive-aggressive. Those words aren't our heart. Our heart is something completely different. But every single person we speak to thinks that we are those words because that's the expression that comes out. So they never get to know our heart. They're not listening. And the second part of that is we're not expressing the truth about ourselves because we're not in touch with it, because we're not listening to the truth. We're listening to our fear, we're listening to our phobia, we're listening to our frustration, we're listening to, and we're not acknowledging it. When we acknowledge it, it's one thing. Then there's a learning opportunity and a more truthful expression. But if we're loaded with anger and we're just stuffing it down, we think, it comes out every other word we say, then people look and say, well, you're an angry person. It's like, you're not an angry person. You're just a person who hasn't listened to your anger. And so you don't really know what to do with it. People think physics is hard. They think geometry is hard. They think all these sciences, quantum is hard, It's complicated, it's this, it's that. Have you ever listened to someone speak eloquently about it? No, I can't understand a word they say. You just said two things there. You just said, I can't understand a word they say, but no, I've never listened. If you listen, then you might learn that it's not as complicated as you think it is. There will be at least one or two intersections between your mind and what's being said that you can relate to. And then you can build from there. But if we never even try to listen, then something as amazing as quantum physics will escape us forever. Do you know why those scientists like Wheeler found quantum physics? Because they were listening. They were listening. They were listening and looking, and they were investing their senses in having a truthful experience with something that moved beyond the realm of what we thought we understood. They didn't let their fear get the best of them. They decided they were going to go outside the comfort zone. And they were ridiculed, and they were called crazy, and totally wrong, and uneducated, and all these other things, only to come to find out that they're actually spot on, They didn't let that fear stop them from a truer communication, a more pure communication with what? With the universe. Because that's what quantum is. It's a greater, deeper experience of the universe, therefore of source. So when we are not communicating, when we're not listening, and when we're not expressing truthfully, when we're not present, when we're more absent, then we can't have relationship with source. It's just not possible. And if anybody thinks differently, I would love to hear how it would be possible to be absent, other than like spiritual absence, which is the elimination of the ego, But that's presence, That's a dichotomy. Yeah. A paradox. Yeah. But if we're just ignorant, if we can't connect on the most basic foundation of listening to each other, then how on earth are we going to listen to something we can't even see? Something we can't smell, taste, touch. Something we think is way, way, way beyond us. We have to slow down and start practicing a practice. Years ago, long time ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I came into a practice within the counseling that I do and within my personal relationships also, where I started asking, this is what I just heard you say. Am I hearing correctly? And if I'm not hearing correctly, please correct me, because I really want to know. And I tell you, I was just shocked at how many times I wasn't hearing. Like, you ever play that telephone game where you've got 5 people lined up? Remember when we did that with the kids last year? Yeah. Oh my gosh, was that really? Where you start off and I tell Tomas something, and then Tomas tells Rich, and Rich tells Michelle, and so on. And by the time it gets to Lori, it's like a completely different statement, That's every conversation. There's so many different reasons why it happens, but it really does come down to the basic fear. Fear of not being heard, fear of not being able to express one's thoughts, fear of not being important, fear of not having someone validate us, fear of loneliness. So if we want to get to the crux of the relationship, and if we really want to honor the people who are in our circle, then we need to overcome our fear and really start listening. Really, really listen. 100% investment. The other thing that we do in our conversations, in our relationships, is we start to formulate our response before the person's even spoken. So if we're formulating a response, if I'm looking at you and I'm like, oh, I know you're going to talk to me, this is what I'm going to tell you. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to tell you about yesterday or tomorrow. And you have something you want to say to me, I'm absent in that moment. Because I'm more worried about you hearing me than I am about listening to you. So the conversation may be a wonderful conversation and a really full conversation, but it won't be a completely present conversation because it didn't start off that way. You ever watch runners or horse races or I think car races too? It happens where there's a moment where you take off, and if there's a hiccup in that takeoff, then the entire rest of the race is catch up. It's like that person is consistently lagging behind unless they've got the skill to catch up, which is not often. Have you ever seen that happen? Yeah, where there's like this little stumble, right? It's like the horse coming out of the gate. That first step out of the gate is the most important step for the horse and for the jockey. I only know that because I used to work at the stables when I was a young teenager. And I didn't work there because I agreed with horse racing. I worked there because I love the horses. But anyway. But what I learned some pretty amazing things. That first step out of the stall and onto the track is the most important step for both jockey and horse. And if that step is off, then the entire race is off for that particular horse. And then the jockey has to somehow get the pace back. Our relationships, our conversations are like that too. If the conversation starts off on an odd footing of absence, then it's going to be really hard to become present without some deep skill and sincere maneuvering of pressing the ego to balance itself and to stop trying to catch up and instead just be present. Does that make sense? Yeah. Is this resonating? Yeah. So why does communication matter? Why does the back and forth matter? Why does the presence matter? Because we suffer. Because our lives are full of suffering. And we don't want to. We don't want to suffer. And the key to alleviating suffering is our presence. Not someone else's presence, but our presence. The more present we are to this moment, the less chaotic suffering we will experience within ourselves. The less present we are, the more suffering we'll experience. The more suffering, the more fear, the more absence. Because when we go into hiding. But the more we bring ourselves present, the more we just begin to open up. And we open up to what we're feeling, what we're thinking. We start recognizing patterns and tendencies. We're open up to deeper integration of ourself, a deeper connection to ourself, body, mind, spirit, soul, super soul, whatever you want to call it, source. And once we start opening up to that, even a little tiny bit, then we open up to each other more. And then we look at each other and we're like, wow, I see you in a completely different light now. I recognize that I was hiding behind my words. I was hiding behind actions. I was hiding deep in my own ignorance, like we all are. So now I can have compassion for the struggle that you're going through. And I can recognize, I can't pull you out of it. I can't tell you and demand, I can't fix you. It's not my job. but I can hold space. We can all hold space. And we can recognize that everybody is lost in that absence, trying to claw their way to the top of the ravine of absence so that they can feel some form of presence. And the only presence is in letting go and falling into it, rather than trying to claw our way up out of it. That connection with Source is everything, because I really feel that there are just poignant moments in life. I love that they talked about that yesterday too. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah. Because that morning I shared those 5 points in my own life, and then we had some guest speakers come in yesterday for a training on leadership that we're doing. And beautifully, they talked about their points in life, the poignant points. And it was just like, yes, there are these moments in life where it's just this energy comes to you and opens you up and is so clear and so concise that you cannot deny it. You just can't. You can shut yourself down to it, but there's no denying it. None. And that's such a potent moment. That is like the most fertile soil for personal growth. It's like that's the moment that you should listen. Listen so consciously so you can hear the message from Source. Your life is not a waste. Your experiences are not a waste. Your heart healing and your heart opening are not impossible. And that you are exactly where you are meant to be so that you can have this awakening experience in this life. And that's the message you'll receive, is that you are loved as you are. You are spiritually perfect as you are. None of us are humanly perfect because that's just not accessible. But we're spiritually perfect as we are, with all of our flaws and all of our perfections, with all of our everything. We're divinely perfect in our diversity, because that's the work we're meant to do in this life. So when you recognize that you're fearful and that fear is causing you to hide behind words and actions rather than step into presence, then acknowledge that and work to overcome your fear, just like you would work to get a stain out of your floor or your new white shirt. Right? You buy a white shirt if you're anything like me, and I have a lot of white shirts. And, you go to get your coffee or your food or whatever it happens to be, and inevitably, no matter how careful you are, the other day I took the elderberry syrup out of the refrigerator and I went to shake it, and the top wasn't on. And I was like, no! And then you work to scrub those stains out, and you go and you get the latest little cleaning stick and all kinds of stuff out of a shirt that's disposable. Do we use that kind of attention on our own soul, on our own being? How much do we scrub to try to get the stain out? The stain of ignorance, the stain of misunderstanding, the stain of absence. It's not as easy as fabric. Yeah, you're so right. It's so true. It's just not. But the gift is so much greater than the shirt. We look at the shirt and say, oh, thank goodness I saved my shirt. And yet here we are drowning, And we don't see our life as valuable as a shirt. We don't see being able to be present with Source, with each other, with everything, as anywhere near as valuable as a shirt that we paid $10 for, $20, $50, $100, whatever it is. Surely our soul is more important than that, worth a little bit of scrubbing. When we're not scrubbing, We're not connecting. And then source escapes us. Not really. We just think it does. We blame it. We say, you forsaked me. You didn't come to me. You didn't support me. You ever meet someone who hates God? I never hated God. There was definitely a time where I didn't have faith. There was one, though. And that was in my part of my teenage years, when I was just like, yeah, there can't be one, because if there was, there wouldn't be suffering like this in the world. That was before I understood the purpose of suffering. Those were words that I was hiding behind. That's not really what I knew. I was just pissed off at my own trauma. I was angry at the abuse I experienced as a child. I was mad. Just like, when you're mad at someone and you're not talking to them? I wasn't talking to God. I was denying. I said, you don't really exist, because if you did, you would be a better person. And I was hiding behind that. I was hiding behind that fear. I was hiding behind that anger. And I was not allowing my deeper truth to come forward and to bring me into presence. At moments it did, because there were lots of times where I looked directly into the face of my life and my life experience and my trauma. I looked directly at it and recognized it for what it was, recognized it for the suffering that it was and for the purpose behind it. But then I would shut back down again. And I would go into I'm not talking to you, God. You don't exist. Such absence. It was what it was meant to be. It was. You have to go, hit bottom before you can bounce back up. I'm just so grateful that I started to bounce back up. At whatever place that I'm at right now, somewhere on a craggy, rocky ledge, still clawing my way to the top, while I'm also letting go. It's so confusing, Do we climb up? Do we jump off? Do we hold on? Do we let go? But the difference between now and, moments in my deep past are that now I work in many moments to try to be present. To try to be present to my irritation, my frustration, my aggravation, my anger, my love, my joy, my laughter, the rays of the sun, the beams of the moon, the song of the birds, the laughter of my grandchildren, all of it. I just try really hard to be present to that so that I can have a genuine relationship with it rather than an absent relationship. And I'm not good at it. Nobody is. But what I know now what I know more now that I knew less of in previous days is that that's my choice. And I always have the choice to become more present or more absent. And I also have the understanding that more absence leads to more suffering, and more presence leads to more healing. So which one am I going to choose? And it's not God's fault, so I can stop blaming her. And it's not anybody else's fault, so I can stop blaming them. And it's not even my fault, so I can stop blaming myself and instead step into my own self-responsibility and step up into living this beautiful, wonderful, crazy life that I've been given, that I've been gifted, rather than letting it waste away because I'm absent. I had a student once when I was teaching at Temple University, and we were probably about 3 weeks into the semester, and we were just past the date where the students could drop classes and without a signature. So now if they wanted to drop a class, they had to come get a signature, otherwise they'd get an F. And this student comes up to me after class, and I swear he wasn't in class, but anyway, comes up to me, and he says, "Hey, professor, can you sign this?" And I said, "Well, what is this?" And he said, "Well, I want to drop the class." I said, okay, can you tell me why? He said, oh, I don't like it. It's boring. And I looked at him and I said, how many times have you been in class? Oh, I come. I said, really? Where do you sit? Oh, right there. I said, no, you don't. Tommy sits there. Oh, no, I mean the one behind that. Well, that's Angela. Well, okay, I came a couple of times. I said, really? Did you sign in? Because I don't see you on the sign-in sheet. I came once. How do you know class is boring if you came once? How do you know if that's the only investment you put into it? You know? How do we know that this life is boring if we're absent 90% of the time? How do we know this life is only suffering? How do we know this life is never going to fulfill our dreams or give us what we want if we're absent 90% of the time? We don't know. So we have to bring ourselves forward and make an investment so that whatever we decide comes from a place of experience and not ignorance. So I signed his paper. He went off and did something else. That was fine. But it was a great moment for me to look at that and to recognize, you know. Just like the parent with the child. I got a note from the principal. One of the parents wants to take the child out of the yoga class because the child's bored. I said, it's the first week. The child can't be bored. They haven't done anything yet. You know? It's like we need to look at the communication that we're using and own it. And own it. In your own experience, where do you go to the always and never? Yeah. You always do that. You never do that. It's just so absent. Those words don't really mean anything. They just don't. I had a student who said to me one time, why do you always try to look at things so, how would she say? Basically with rose-colored glasses. She was asking a question about positivity, but it kind of turned into like, why do you always deny the negative and embrace the positive? I said, I don't deny the negative. I said, I just understand that that's not the whole picture. You know, I understand that someone can be an irritating, absolutely. They can totally get under my skin and they can aggravate me with their words and their actions, but they can also be a love. And I get that. I get that there's at a minimum two sides to every single person that I meet. And I really try, not successfully all the time, but I try to honor all sides. Because if I see a person as only an irritant, then I have shut myself off and become completely absent to that person. As I know myself. I'm done. I'm one of those. Or I used to be. I don't know, maybe I still am. I'll be honest, I probably still am.
Can you find when you're as an irritant and know that even though there's good and beauty in that person, you still don't have to be around them?
That's right, absolutely. And then it's a choice.
Beauty there, but I'm just going to go over.
Absolutely. And then you're making that choice. You're not being absent, you know, you're just saying, you're making the conscious choice of, this is not the energy that I wish to invest in, so I'm going to remove myself now. Yeah, that's so different. Yeah, or remove them. Yeah. And so that's so different than just saying, you know, you're an irritant and then walking around like you're an irritant. Yeah. It's different. It brings a different quality forward from you, and it also invests a different quality in them. Absolutely. People know when you don't appreciate them, and they don't mean to be irritating. They really don't. Because they're just as absent. And they're hiding behind their words, their actions, and their tendencies, the same way that we all are. And one day they'll wake up and recognize that, just like one day we all will. On many days we all will. And then we'll go back to sleep again. We'll wake up a little, and then we'll nod off. It's like one of those lazy mornings where you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So when we're absent, we're more likely to hurt and harm others. And when we're present, we're not. Because there's this thing about knowing my words and my actions do something. And the more we witness the consequences of our words, our thoughts, and our actions, the heavier they are on our own shoulders. So even if in a moment I find someone irritating, I'm not going to go out of my way to hurt them. I'll express my irritation to whatever degree I can, mindfully if possible. Definitely not always mindfully though, but I try. And then I'll work to resolve as best I can in whatever time frame I can. Because I don't want anybody to walk away from an interaction feeling like they've been hit, hurt, beaten down, that their worst fear about themselves has come true, that all the bad things people say to them must be true because one more person got irritated with them. So in my own relationships with people, I try to maneuver myself in conversations so that I may be addressing something that's really difficult, but I'm also addressing the positive, the growth, the beauty, the wonder, the connection. And that way, it's not harmful. That intention isn't there. And it's definitely a lot of work, but we can all do it. And I really think in the world today, if we're not happy with the way the world is today, then we have to do it. When I teach more theology-based classes, I share a lot of the time that there's common threads that run through every single organized tradition in this world. I don't know why religions argue with each other. They all teach the same exact thing as the foundational teaching. So I just want to share this with you. This is from the book, The Sacred Art of Listening by Kay Lindahl. And here, she's talking a little bit about listening as connection to each other and then ultimately connection to source. And she's saying, we can look at all the religions of the world, all of them, not one is absent. In the Baha'i tradition, lay not on any soul a load that you would not wish to be laid upon you, and desire not for anyone the things you would not desire for yourself. In Buddhism, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. In Christianity, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In Confucianism, do not do unto others what you do not want others to do unto you. In Hinduism, do not to others that which, if done to you, would cause you pain. In Islam, none of you truly have the faith if you do not desire for your brother or sister that which you desire for yourself. In Jainism, in happiness and suffering, in joy and grief, we should regard all creatures as our own self. In Judaism, what is hateful to you, do not do that to your neighbor. This is the whole Torah. All the rest is commentary. Native American, respect for all life is the foundation. In Sikhism, don't create enmity with anyone, as God is within everyone. In Wicca, if it harms none, then do what you will. In Zoroastrianism, do not do unto others all that which is not well for oneself. Every tradition in the world teaches the same thing. And it's so hard to follow. And the only reason, which a lot of factors are lumped into, that it's so hard to follow is because we're absent in so many moments. And if we're absent, then we're not seeing the harm that we're committing. And we're not actively working to resolve the harm. Everyone in here is working to resolve the harm in your own life, but we can all do it more. We can still be present more and absent less, and more and more and more. It's like, you have a moment where you taste the perfect recipe of your favorite food that someone else made. And now you go home and you try to recreate that recipe. And, if you really liked it, you probably won't stop until you get it. You'll keep trying to make it over and over again. How many loaves of bread did Brahmani make, Michelle?
We still get a lot of bread.
Oh, man. How many cookies after cookies after cookies? And Vani, too, right, with those cookies. Those poor interns had to eat all those cookies. All the test batches. But that's like the sweetness of presence. You feel it once, and everything came together. And then it was just so sweet and perfect that there's a part of you that wants to go to greater and greater and greater extents to feel it again and more often. Because you know that there's a truth there. A truth that is really kind of beyond words. That we might call love, we might call unity, we might call oneness with Source, we might call it yoga. But it's actually beyond those words. It's actually beyond those words. And the only thing that it asks of us is to be present with it. So thoughts, reflections, questions, ideas, answers.
Who are we communicating with? Because, in meditation, my understanding or my experience has been that we drop into this still, silent voice within.
Mm. Yeah.
So, from there, listening to somebody else's still, silent voice within seems to allow information from that place of non-form or from that place of unconditional love, then the words have the right meaning. So regardless of what my brother says to me, regardless of how painful my sister believes that she is, I can listen to the unconditional love within her being. That's all I got.
Wow. Information. That's blowing my mind a little bit right now. I love language. When we take in information, we're putting it in formation. We're lining it up. And we can look at this in one of two ways. They're opposite sides of the same coin. If you see a soldier in formation, that soldier can only be one way, which means that everything that's outside of that formation is not accessible in that moment to him. But if that person is formless, then everything is accessible. So if someone comes up to you and says, "I hate you," and you fall into that formation, then that person's hate is the only thing that you will see, hear, and accept. But if a person comes up to you and says, "I hate you," and you move out of formation and into the formless, then you can move into the love that is being masked by the hate. That's powerful, Thomas.
It's subtle. It's so very, very subtle. It's not of the words. It's not even of the intonation.
No.
It's of such a subtle delicacy that gets covered up, right? Or it just
It does get covered up.
And it's like static or interference but it's always there. It's always there.
Yeah. Talk to everyone like they're God.
Listen to
Yeah.
everyone.
Like they're God.
Yeah, because they are.
Connect with everyone like they're God. On all levels. Wow. And then if you listen to everyone like they're God, if someone says, I hate you, you know God isn't going to say that to you. So you know that's just the human speaking.
Well, then I get to be God. And
Yeah.
that's seriously.
It's true.
Listen for the call for love.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a call for love, right?
Oh.
They forgot for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember for them, for us, in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
And then I can forget and they can remember.
That's the dance.
There you go.
That's the Leela. That's the Leela. That's the Maya. That's the Maya. Yeah. That's the Maya. Other thoughts, reflections?
So I work in a corporate setting, and it seems like everybody wants to talk and nobody wants to listen. And it's very draining at the end of the day if you're trying to listen. Do you have any words of advice?
Yeah, I have a story I can share with you. Some of you have heard this before. So, I opened the Kula Kamala Yoga School, I don't even know, 14 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that. And the second location we were in, we had these students who on Sunday morning would come to Yin. They were long-term students. It's like 5-6 years. Every Sunday, this core group of students would come in. It's so funny. 3 men, 2 women. And they knew each other. Like, they went out for coffee after class, They knew each other. They hung out. They had their mats all set up right next to each other. They suffered through Yin together. And one day, class ends, and I go downstairs. And the one gentleman comes down, and he looks a little irritated. I'm like, hey, what's going on? How you doing today? And he's like, I got to talk to you. I said, okay. And he kind of sits down and he looks at me and he goes, every time she breathes, I just want to tell her, stop it. I'm laughing on the inside because I know exactly who he's talking about, because this one of their 5 who's been there every week that he's been there for the past 5 or 6 years. She works out at the gym. She's actually a weightlifting coach. And so she's got gym breathing, which is, it's like that real. And that's how she gets into her yoga. And I just looked at him and I just was like, you've been sitting next to her for 5 years. This is just now bothering you. And he was like, well, it started a couple of months ago and I didn't really want to say anything. I figured it would pass, but it's just getting worse. So I said, okay, I'll give you a little homework to do. I said, when you go home all week this week, anytime you hear a noise, whether it's delightful or frustrating, listen. Listen. And hear Om. And he looked at me. He said, Sudha, what the hell kind of help is that? I said, think about it for a moment. Om is the primordial sound of the universe. All truth is contained in it. There's no sound that isn't included in it. Therefore, every sound you ever hear is a small, little, tiny fraction of the truth. Can you find that in there? Fine, I'll try. Isn't going to work, though. So a few weeks go by. He's in class every week, I didn't bring it up with him again until he brought it up with me. Several weeks later, he comes back. And I said, how's it going? He's like, it's working, sort of. I said, okay, keep doing it. When people are being people, whether they're complaining or complimenting or imagining or being very clear or snoring or breathing heavy, can you experience a little bit of truth in that moment? Can you choose to hear that as an expression of divine consciousness?
Snoring?
Sure. That one's really hard. I completely admit it. Oh my gosh, my husband was such a snoring person. He snored. He's so loud. He really did. But he stopped snoring. He ended up, not with any CPAP or anything like that. He just, he knew that it kept me awake, and eventually he stopped doing it. Power of love, right? Man, powerful. But yeah, and even if we can't overcome the irritation that we feel, it's better to look for the truth than the irritation.
I feel like I'm more centered, so I don't get as irritated, but at the end of the day, I'm drained.
Yeah.
I just feel like I come home and I have no more left to give.
Then you're not centered. Then you're struggling to be centered.
I am.
You're struggling to be centered instead of surrendering into it. We run yoga teacher trainings, and sometimes there's 8 people in the training, sometimes there's 20. Yeah. There's always a lot of energy, and inevitably there's always several people coming up in order to express whatever it is that they need to express, and oftentimes it's pretty heavy energy. So there's a level of surrendering that occurs to allow them to express what they need to express, while I am also in my practice of understanding that that doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to me. So I'll hold the space for you to say what you have to say, vent what you have to vent, cry what you have to cry, scream what you have to scream. But I will also let you take it with you, because that's not my work. In that moment, my work is holding a space where you can express what you need to express. And if I take that from you, I'm stealing from you. If I take that from you, then I'm trying to do your work for you. So maybe think about that for a little while. Instead of bracing down and preparing for the onslaught, which we all do so eloquently, Instead, just hold a space. And understand that what they're bringing to you, whatever their complaints or compliments are, whatever, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to them. And if there's something that they're sharing with you that has to do with your job, your position there, then you'll know what is valid and what's not. And then, because you're not taking on the burden of every single complaint, of every single compliment, and yet compliments are a burden too, then you'll have more energy left over to address what actually needs to have you addressing it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in that regard, in that way, you're listening for the truth. You're holding a space and listening for the truth.
The exhausting thing is the part of you that feels that you need to respond to what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you don't.
You don't.
You really don't.
Mm-mm.
It's an artificial construct that we bought into, that says, oh, well, you're talking about your daughter, and I need to tell you what I think about what you're saying. We really don't have to do that. And as a matter of fact, if you really listen to the breath between the words, or the om, beneath what those words are pointing to, they will feel more heard and listened to without your response. It's a paradox. It really is. It's a paradox because you think you need to keep pace with the topic or whatever it is that you're playing volleyball with. You really don't. You just need to be the sand. Let the balls fall where they will.
Yeah.
And they'll pick it up and they'll hit it all by themselves.
It's so true. Yeah.
I think I need to respond to my mother. Go figure.
I did too.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Special people have that hook, where it's like, oh yeah, I've got to pay attention. Then I saw her as a barking dog. It's like, wow, she's just doing what she's doing, man. She's just barking her bark. And I love you. That's it. And what, maybe I don't say those words, but like somehow, the words will come. But it's all the same. It's just, I love you. So how do those words show up? I don't know. I'm sorry, or that's too bad. Or, just her language, right? Because it's her language. I don't understand what a dog is saying when it barks, but I kind of have a sense of what the dog is feeling when it barks. And it doesn't matter, I'm trying to figure it out.
Sometimes when people say things like your mom, like a mom, the greatest advice I ever received from a counselor years ago was, "Why are you answering the phone?" I said, "Because it's my mother. She's going to get mad." She's like, "Well, if she's on the other end of the phone, you don't have to pick it up." But also, when someone says something to you, you can mirror. If you do have to respond, like in a work environment, your response is required. You can mirror them and say, "Please, correct me, but I'm hearing worry in your voice. I'm hearing frustration in your voice. I'm hearing, excitement and enthusiasm in your voice. And what would you like to do with that? What would you like to do with that?" "Well, I'd like my frustration to go away." Well, what would serve you in alleviating your frustration? Most of the time when people come to a boss or even a coworker, most of the time there's really nothing that can be done because it's all interpersonal conflict that's based on personality and gossip. It really is. And so when we come into the place where we don't feel that we have to respond or react, then we're stopping the gossip in its tracks. That's it. And
they can rest too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So this being present serves us in so many different ways, and when we're present, it's not exhausting. When we're really present, it's not exhausting. When we're reacting, it's freaking exhausting. Oh my gosh. But when we're present, it's not, because presence is a conservation of energy. Presence is conserving personal energy. It's saying, in my life, my most important relationship in my life is myself to Source. That is the most important relationship in my life. And if that relationship is in line, then my relationship with you is in line. But if my most important relationship in my life is you liking me, is you not liking me, is you, then my relationship with Source is out of alignment, which means that my relationship with you is out of alignment. So having my relationship with Source come first conserves my energy. Because if you think about it, it's typically for us, Do you like me? 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 Are you happy with me? Are you unhappy with me? Are you mad at me? Are you joyous with me? Are you in love with me? Are you hating me? Are you hurting me? Are you helping me? Are you supporting me? Oh my God, there's 7 billion people in the world. That's exhausting. But there's only one source. And if you are aligned with that, then all those other relationships fall into place. Now, any other thoughts, Michelle?
2 things today happened. I got a long message from someone that does some work with me, and it was venting things happening in your life. And the response was pretty easy as well. It was, wow, you have a lot happening. You're in my heart during this time. And it was so easy to just send my love to her and let her have it. I heard what she said. I had compassion for what she said.
Mm-hmm.
But all I can do for her is let her know that, just letting some positive energy to her. So that happened this morning. And then my mother called. All this morning.
Always the mother.
I don't even know how I had time for all this morning.
And think about that message now, right? So you get this message and someone's venting. Reaction A. Oh, yeah, so-and-so is this, so-and-so is that. Well, this is what you should do. That is completely unempowering. That is completely unempowering because you're trying to fix that situation.
Yeah. And even though she was asking me a question, she had the answer already.
Exactly. So response A is, I hear you have a lot of things going on. I have complete faith that you're going to work this out. You're making so many great points already.
The response I gave my daughter when she called me from jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have complete faith that you can work this out.
Yep.
A long time ago.
And that's empowering because really, when they are asking you, what should I do? What they're saying, what the heart is saying, but they're hiding behind words is, please tell me I'm strong enough to deal with this.
And don't take that. Don't take that from them.
That's right. And don't take it from me. Just reassure me I'm strong enough. Just reassure me. Yeah, it's powerful. But to be able to see that, to be able to respond, and to be able to hear the actual question that's being asked requires us to be present more consistently and more profoundly.
So that comes from the practice of working on ourselves and our connection to a source for our personal connection. And it's what we talked about in our leadership program was if we come to any situation, anything, the work environment, from our heart, from our truth, that's where we get the energy to move through it. And you won't be exhausted at the end of the day in your job if your energy is coming from your relationship with yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If relationship with source or higher self, inner self, is the most important relationship, and you base every other relationship on that one, then you'll know what to do.
It's not exhausting anymore.
No.
Triggers, I imagine.
As a matter of fact, it gets inspiring because then you start to see people changing and maybe even becoming inspired. And then they become creative. And to witness people becoming creative in their own problem solving is pretty cool. It really is, because they're so much smarter than they think they are. They're so much more with it than they think they are. And because maybe we humbly choose to not fix things or try, they get to figure it out.
That's where my mother comes in, because that's exactly the practice that had to be in play in last practice. So that when she called me today, there were no triggers. And she heard me, and I heard her, and we held a nice conversation, and that's what I said then.
Lori, did you want to reflect?
This related to me because I'm in a corporate setting too. And as I was listening to you and reflecting on how I've let these situations at work, particularly, swing me around for years and wishing it wouldn't be that way. And then I was thinking that isn't it great that we could kind of shift perspective and say, this is a great way for us to practice. We have a great opportunity to deepen our own, to practice, to be in an environment where we can, and the other thing is to impact others just by what we do. Not that we're trying to fix people, but just by
Example.
allowing them to be and not. And I don't have the exact formula of how to do it, but it's kind of your response to the home, to the man that was hearing that. How can we look at this in a way that this is just something that is here in the world that is part of the bigger, and how can we appreciate it, but not, because I can be exhausted too.
Yeah, and I do believe I started off with him with gratitude. I say, can you find gratitude? I mean, thank goodness she's breathing. You know? He didn't see the humor in that. No, he didn't see the humor in that.
Yeah, I want to share. When I filed for divorce, I wanted to go and move in the apartment and move through the process away from that. And I thought I would be more grounded because it was very hard for me to find that place since I was never connected. And I remember my husband said, don't run away. You can do this here, in the middle of that. Because if you would run away now, it will come from somewhere else. You will have to face it. And you will have to find yourself in the middle of the scales. And then you can go to the world. Don't run away. Do this here.
Yeah. Yep.
It's hard.
It is hard. It is.
Sometimes during the conversation, I see like smacking something on that head. I'm not so present because I'm so
In an alternate dimension. Oh, goodness. Well, let's sit up nice and tall. We'll close the eyes. And we'll practice just for a moment listening to the deep, deep, heartfelt inner messages that are coming through the universe, through consciousness, to you. Placing the right hand on the heart, left hand over the right. And with deep gratitude, we'll lift our voices in one beautiful Om. Take a nice breath in. Om. Bowing the head to the heart, acknowledging all. And drawing the face to center. Namaste. So good to see and to gather with each and every one of you today and every day. Enjoy your day. Just as a reminder, next Sunday, Charles will be sitting in for me. He'll be teaching the 9 a.m. yin class, and he'll be,
During the retreat or the following Sunday?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's the following Sunday, yeah. I'm getting ahead of myself. So 2 weeks from now. Next week I will be here, and then we leave. Yeah. Yeah. So next week I will be here, but the week after that, Dayananda will be sitting in for me, and he'll be leading the discussion. So I hope you can make it for that. And definitely come next week.
I used to go to the temple like